Welcome to Resilience in Life and Leadership with your host, Stephanie Olson. Hello, I am so excited about this next guest. Now, I will tell you, I am giving you a trigger warning. We are going to be talking about some really heavy stuff, mental illness and suicidality. And so just to let you know that in advance. But if you can, listen to this inspirational story of Heather Hutchison. Heather is the Amazon bestselling author of Holding On by Letting Go, a memoir and an award-winning singer-songwriter with 3 albums released to date. Blind since birth and having struggled with mental illness from a young age, she is passionate about educating people on disability and mental health through her music and writing. Heather is a frequent guest on national television and radio programs and renowned podcasts across the globe to share her message of hope to those who are struggling. In her advocacy work, she has appeared alongside numerous high-profile psychologists, clinical counselors, and other mental health professionals. An avid traveler, she has spent time living and teaching English in Latin America. Heather lives on the west coast of Canada with her partner Jordan and their cat Maya. When she isn't writing, playing music, or traveling, she can usually be found at the beach or curled up with a good book and a chai latte. Welcome to the podcast, Heather Hutchison.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Being Resilient podcast. I am so excited to be here with Heather Hutchison, and I cannot wait for you to hear her story and just to hear her story of resilience and what she is doing. Heather is doing some amazing things. So welcome, Heather. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So I definitely want to get to your albums and your book, but first share a little bit about your story and what brought you to where you are today.
So I was born blind and I started singing at a really early age and released some albums and have always kind of struggled with my mental health. And so music was a big part of that for me, really getting my feelings down and out on paper or in music, I guess. And when I was hospitalized back in the spring of 2020 for psychiatric care, I came to the conclusion that I should also share my story in written form, in the form of a memoir. So
I love that. I love that. So would you be willing to share a little bit? Because I will tell you, I have a story of hospitalization that literally changed my life for the better.
yeah.
And I was struggling with stuff, and I spent a week in the hospital, and it really changed my life. And it was the key, kind of the key moment, that crossroads, that life started to go a different direction, and it was a positive one. So share a little, if you are comfortable, with what you struggled with your mental illness, and how that led you to hospitalization, and just your journey in that aspect.
Yeah, so to go way back, I would say I first noticed that I was struggling back when I was probably about 7 years old, and I started having panic attacks, and I didn't know what they were
At
at the
7,
time.
wow.
Yeah. So you're just like this little kid, and it feels like you're
Yeah,
dying, like to have
yeah,
these panic attacks, and when you don't know what they are, and they just, you know, you're so young, you don't really control your emotions that well, so they're just
right.
coming out of like seemingly nowhere. So
Yeah.
that was, yeah, that was hard. And they would send me home from school a lot because I would be sick to my stomach all the time.
Hmm.
And back in those days, I hope things are getting better, but I remember the pediatrician just basically said, well, she's an anxious kid, she'll grow out of it,
Oh, you're kidding.
which is really unfortunate because I
Oh,
didn't grow
wow.
out of it. And
No.
by my early teens, I think the anxiety really led to depression because who wants to feel like anxious and sick
Yeah.
all the time? So then I started having, probably around the age of 13, major depressive episodes. So
Mm,
I'll be fine for, 6 months, a year even, and then I won't be for a couple
right.
weeks, a couple months. And that's kind of been my journey. And then in November of 2018, I entered into one major depressive episode that didn't really end like the others had. And as the
Mm,
months went on, I just got sicker and sicker. I stopped eating, I stopped sleeping, my hair was
wow.
falling out. And I went to the doctor, arranged an emergency meeting with him, and they were able to keep me out of the hospital that time. They um, adjusted my meds and made sure I was getting more outpatient mental health supports,
Yeah.
and things were getting better. And then in March of 2020, when the pandemic hit, all of
Yes.
a sudden everything was kind of put on hold. My doctors and therapists weren't seeing people in person
Right.
anymore. They didn't have video calls set up at that point, so it was just audio, and they
Oh,
really kind of
wow.
missed the physical signs, I guess, of my decline, and they were harder to reach, and I wasn't far enough along in my recovery where I could
Sure.
cope alone, plus the added stress of the pandemic and feeling out of control, because that's a big thing for me,
Yeah,
has always been like, with anxiety, you want to be in control of everything.
absolutely.
And COVID came and it took that all away. And for
Yeah.
me too, when I'm really struggling with depression, I have kind of these survival goals almost. So I'll be
Mm,
like, I can't kill myself until my friend comes to visit, or I can't kill myself until I go to Mexico one
wow.
last time, things like that. So I would, you know, keep building these things up in my mind. And then when they passed, I would have another thing to kind of hopefully take its place and keep me going
So,
longer.
yeah, so that was a tool that you
Yes.
used to, wow,
Yeah.
that's
And COVID took
amazing.
that away because
Yeah.
we didn't know when anything would happen. So there was nothing to look forward to. It all seemed kind of pointless.
Yeah.
Everything was out of control. So I kind of realized, I thought to myself, well, the one thing I still can control is how and when I'm going to die.
Oh, wow. My goodness. Yeah. So, I want to go back really quick and then I want to come back to that because that is a hugely important thing that you said just now. But when you're talking panic attacks, I think it's important. I think people who have never either experienced panic attacks themselves or haven't experienced someone in their life who has had panic attacks don't always really understand
Mm-hmm.
what those are. And I think there's this mindset that they're just, it's extra anxiety, but it is truly a physiological um, thing that happens with the body. And when you said you feel like you're going to die, that is literally what it feels like. Often it feels like you're having a heart attack or it feels like something like that. True?
Yeah, yeah, it's like the end of the world. There's nothing good left in the world, and all there is this like impending sense of doom, I guess. And yeah,
Right.
the physiological symptoms, your heart races.
Yeah.
I tend to like pass out.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, things like that.
Yeah. Okay. So then um, COVID hit, you are going through an extremely depressive episode, and you're at the point that now you don't have those tools in place that were actually in place to keep you from suicidality. Is that,
Yes.
yeah. So what did you do? What happened?
So I put all my affairs in order. I planned everything out perfectly, and
Wow.
but before I did, I thought to myself, well, I'm going to go to the hospital because, well, for two reasons. One reason, I was seeking absolution. So I wasn't really looking to
Mm.
get better by that point. I was just like, well, when I'm gone, my friends and family will be able to look back on this and be like, well, she tried.
Oh,
And then
wow.
I had a safety plan with one of my counselors way back when I started with him, and it kind of lists, so it's super helpful. I think it's
Yeah.
a really good tool. It lists signs that I'm spiraling, then things that I can do to change that or cope with it
Mm-hmm.
in order of like least severity to most severity. So, if I'm really struggling, call a friend, play music, things like that. And the very
Yes.
last thing on the list was, if all else fails, go to the hospital. So I thought, okay,
Right.
fine. But they're just going to say, oh, you're fine. And they're going to send me home. And then I can, continue on with my plan. But obviously, it didn't quite work out that way. And I ended
Yeah.
up being hospitalized as an involuntary patient.
Wow. Which is probably the best thing that could have happened for you at that moment.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. Wow. Well, and I think it's important to really stop. Your story is it was sobering, and I think that we, you know, COVID was such, I mean, we're still going through it, and we're
Yeah.
still I think that when the pandemic started, um I thought, okay, well, we'll be in our homes for a week, maybe
Yeah. Two
two, and
weeks,
then
two
we'll be
weeks, they
good,
kept saying.
right?
Yeah.
And then
Flatten
it
the curve.
lasted a lot, like, yeah, flatten the curve.
Yeah. Just 2 more weeks.
We're still flattening.
Yeah.
So,
Exactly.
but I think that it was a really interesting time because there were some people who were like, what's your problem? Just stay isolated, stay at home, we'll be fine. And other people who were literally crying out for help
Yeah.
because they had uh, just whether it was people in domestic violence situations that were now isolated with their abusers all of the time, people who had severe anxiety and depression, who it was just increasing because of some of the things that you're speaking to, and then people who are coping in ways that are definitely not healthy coping mechanisms like alcohol and drugs and things like that. So, yeah, it really rocked so many people's worlds and changed everything.
Yeah.
Wow. So now you had actually, I want to hear about your time in the hospital and what you really learned and came through, but you had written songs, and did you say you had made albums prior to this time? You had
Yeah.
done that
Yeah.
for since childhood,
Yeah.
correct?
I had 3 albums out at that
Wow.
point.
Wow. Okay. So tell me about the time in the hospital and how that turned things not around by any means, but turned things um, to a place where you could say, nope, I want to live.
So yeah, it was the first day. Well, the first couple days were so surreal. Like I remember they allowed my partner to accompany me into emergency. Normally they didn't because of COVID, but they let
Right.
him come in because
Oh,
like
good.
to be a guide basically.
Good.
And when they admitted me, then he had to leave, and I was in a part of the hospital called psychiatric emergency, which is basically very locked down. And so
Sure.
I just remember him going out the door, and the door, like this heavy metal door, slamming behind
Mm.
him, and hearing the lock click into
Oh,
place, and just
wow.
being like, okay, this is, no matter what happens from here, I've come to the end of this road. So
Right.
then, yeah, the next couple of days were, I was just biding my time, honestly,
Mm-hmm.
um, thinking that they were going to let me out anytime.
Right.
I would, be cooperative, but I wasn't really actively participating in my treatment or anything like that. And then there was this one night that I was lying awake. I'd been transferred to a different psych unit by that point, and I was lying awake, and the medevac helicopter landed, bringing a
Wow.
patient in critical condition. And as soon as they got here, they called a code blue over the PA. And I
Mm.
was laying there thinking about this person and everybody who loved them, and thinking, my God, the people, their loved ones must be having one of the scariest nights they'll ever know. And then I started thinking about my own loved ones and thinking, well, how can I feel so much empathy towards these people while knowing the decision I want to make will devastate my own loved ones. And then the patient just thinking, what a crazy juxtaposition. They're in here fighting to live, and I'm in here fighting to die. And one of us has a choice, and I can make that choice. And I can
Wow.
choose to live and to get better. And if I'm going to do that, then I need to make something of this story. So it's not just, kind of this senseless tragedy almost. Make more of such a difficult situation and try and turn it into something positive.
Oh, Heather, that is amazing. I love that. So, how long were you in the hospital?
9 days.
Okay. Okay. And then when you left, were you still in that place? Were you nervous to I mean, because the hospital, as much as we might not want to go in at first, any
Yes.
type of recovery, any type, once you're there,
Yeah.
there is a safety element that is so comforting. And so the thought of leaving can be
Yes.
absolutely terrifying.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. And it seems like such a weird thing because everybody's like, well, who would want to stay in the hospital? But I
Right.
remember the day before I was getting out, the psychiatrist doing rounds and saying, we're had a meeting, we're thinking of releasing you tomorrow, and just kind of going like, but it's safe here.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, that it's very scary. So how did that go? How did walking out into the not as safe world um, go for you?
Yeah, it was scary. I remember one of the nurses saying that the real work starts when you go home, which I
Yes.
think is so true because you don't have
Mhm.
the psychiatrists, you don't have the psych nurses doing, because what they would do is have like little mini, almost like impromptu counseling sessions with you throughout
Mhm.
the day to work on, better coping skills, whether that's CBT or mindfulness, all that kind of
Mhm.
thing. And so they're always reminding you of these things. You're getting these reminders constantly. Then you go home, and, the longer you're out of there and the voices aren't quite so fresh in your
Yeah,
head, then you have to really take that on and do it for yourself. And it is a
right.
scary thing, and it is an adjustment for sure.
Right. It is really hard. So I think one of the biggest things with people who have dealt with suicidal thoughts or who have attempted suicide and um, struggled with that, I think that it's one of those things that family members don't always understand,
No.
and it's a very challenging thing because it's you that's a selfish act, that's
Yeah.
but the where you are in that moment is just about stopping the pain.
Yeah.
Can you
Yeah.
speak
You
to
don't
that at
see any
all?
other
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Was that difficult to deal with your loved ones in that aspect?
For sure. Yeah, I think they really struggled with it. I think some of them still struggle with it to a point, because they didn't really see the signs so much until, it almost was too late. And I think for
Yeah.
my partner, like having to go there and, actually see the inside
Mm.
of a psych ward and then like leave me there, that was like
Oh,
really crushing for him. And I think
yes.
people did feel, like a little bit betrayed. Like I was trying to do something very selfish. But to me, it was this almost weird act of altruism. Like,
Mm.
okay, if I'm not here anymore, yeah, it's going to hurt at first, but in the long time, it's going to be better for
Right.
everybody.
Right. And what have you learned since then with that mindset?
That it's, something you think when you're sick. And
Yeah.
when you're doing better, you don't think that way, and you realize the people that you have around you, and truly how lucky you are to have those people in your life, and you don't want to put them through that.
Yeah.
And you can kind of start to see that you as a person have value, but when you're sick like that, you don't see that. You don't
You don't.
see your worth to the people around you.
That's right. Wow. So tell me about what tools that you used for self-care, for making sure that, when you experienced a triggering moment, that you were doing something that was going to be um, something healthy, that you could get through that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think for me, the key has been to catch it in time because I think if you
Mm,
wait too long to try and intercept that, whatever is going on, whether it's panic, depression, whatever it
yeah.
is, if you wait on it and you don't recognize it immediately, then you get to a point where you can't, none of those coping skills are going to pull you out of it. So I think it's a lot of practice and
Mm,
honestly trial and error, and sometimes you fail at it, practice of recognizing the signs in yourself and catching it right at that moment before it gets too far that you can't
yeah.
catch it. And then if you catch it soon enough, you can, practice self-care, whatever that means to each person. For me, I
Yeah.
might, play music, I might go for a walk, things like that. I also find that self-care, lots of people talk about it being a bubble bath or something like
Mhm.
that. For me, I think self-care is feeling like I have a purpose. So, even if it's
Mm,
something like as mundane as, I don't know, washing the dishes or something, then I
mhm.
can feel good about myself because I've done something. So that to me is a big thing for self-care.
That is great. And you're absolutely right. Self-care is different for every single person,
Yeah.
and what works for you may not work for somebody else, and vice versa. And I think that sometimes you'll hear, okay, this is what you need to do, and this is what you need
Yeah.
to do. And the reality is, it really is different for everybody.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And nobody has all the answers. Nobody has it
No.
figured out. And I think we see, because of social media, we see the influencers with these perfect lives and stuff.
Yeah.
They don't have perfect lives. None of us
Yeah.
has it all figured out.
Yeah, it's definitely, that's a false narrative for sure. Yeah.
Yes.
So tell me about your writings and turning some of that into a memoir.
Yeah, so for me, it was really taking that pain and turning it into a purpose. So I got out of the hospital. I started writing as soon as I could because I wanted to get that part of the story while it was still fresh in my mind
Mm,
and really show people what that was actually like. Because I think, people would ask me, well, is it like it is in the movies? Well, yes and no. So there's that element of fear of the unknown that really scares people and honestly
yeah.
probably prevents a lot of people from getting the help they need. So I really wanted to share that aspect of it. I also wanted to share about what my life has been like as a blind person and how, some of that, like, discrimination is a problem. And
Mm,
I think that, we as a society do need to look at that some more. So I wanted to give people kind of a glimpse into what that's like, and then also be sort of a resource for family and friends of somebody who might be going through what I went through. Because I know for my family and friends, when I was admitted, they started looking for information, and other than like a couple of really clinical articles about, the laws behind the whole, the mental health act or whatever it's
yeah,
called
yeah.
in each different place, there was really nothing. So I wanted to try and give that to people so that they have, because sometimes when you're going through it, you're not like texting your loved ones all the time and they don't really
Right.
know what's going on. So to
Yeah.
give that, I don't know, inside perspective, I guess, for somebody who's been through it and kind of come out on the other side.
I think that is amazing. Because that's really important. And I want to come back to that, but so you said discrimination
Yep.
um, from not being cited. Please tell me more about that, because that is something um, that's kind of hard for me to wrap my mind around, that
Yeah.
you would be discriminated for um, not being able to see. So Can you share a little bit about what kind of discrimination? Now, don't get me wrong, I believe it. And unfortunately, as a woman of color, I've seen a lot of discrimination. I've seen a lot of things. But it's startling to me that somebody would discriminate against you or anybody else for something that is literally uh, not in your control, just like
Yeah.
everything else everybody discriminates from.
Yeah,
But yes,
exactly.
I mean, so please speak to that.
Yeah, so I think you're right. I think lots of people for whatever reason are surprised that people with disabilities get discriminated against because maybe we don't talk about that a ton in the media.
Yeah,
I'm not really sure,
yeah.
but it definitely happens with, job interviews. You have to
Mm.
decide, okay, am I going to tell the interviewer beforehand and risk not getting an interview? Or am I going to tell them, am I going to wait for the interview and then it might be really awkward? And, they'll literally ask you how you get dressed in the morning and things like that that are like totally not
What?
relevant to a job interview.
Wow.
So, or like you're out, I don't know, with friends and somebody
Hmm.
stops your friend and says, "Oh, you're so nice for taking care of her. That's amazing."
Okay.
Yeah. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff. And I think people,
Oh,
like, when they see a blind person, they're like, oh, that sucks because they can't see their loved ones' faces or the sunset or things like that. And I think that kind of abstract thinking
hmm,
makes people more comfortable than thinking about what we could actually change, this societal shift that needs to happen,
right.
something that they can control or contribute to.
Right. And my guess is that there are a lot of things. This is not, I am definitely not comparing myself to any sort of disability, but I recently ruptured my Achilles tendon and couldn't walk. And what I noticed was that our society is not set up physically
No.
for disabilities at
No.
all.
No, not at all.
Yeah. And so what do we need to do about that?
That's a hard one. I think it needs to be, we talk about making buildings more accessible and things like that, which of course is important, but I think it needs to be more of a holistic
Yeah.
kind of view because when people view people with disabilities as equals, as people who should be contributing equally in society, then all
Hmm.
that stuff just kind of tends to follow because like why wouldn't you put in a wheelchair ramp? Why wouldn't you put
Right.
in braille on the elevator buttons or those
Right.
sorts of things because that's just how it is and people of all abilities are included in society. So I think
Correct.
there's not one like thing that we could change, oh put wheelchair ramps in every building. Of course that would be awesome, but I think there's a bit of a bigger picture
Right.
thing that goes along with that.
And I think part of that bigger picture, and I was literally having this conversation with somebody today about this topic in general, but I think that people who are not able to look at the um, you know the the path of other people, or this is what this individual needs because of whatever, because they're so focused on themselves.
Yes.
And I think as a society we really have just become very focused on me,
Yeah.
and we really need to look at things through other people's eyes.
Yeah, I think so. And to stop being uncomfortable about everything because when
Yeah.
we're uncomfortable, we react with fear. And that's not, a good feeling to be walking around and have people like literally scared of you. So,
Well, exactly. And I think that um eh, and we actually can't be afraid to have those discussions and
yes.
just be very honest about, when all of that stuff with Black Lives Matter
Mm-hmm.
happened. And I mean, we've gone through quite a time in our, I've always said we need to stop changing history or making history. I'm ready to just go back to boring old everyday, whatever the year is.
Yes.
But so many people were afraid to ask me questions because they didn't
Hmm.
want to offend me. And I thought, well, really the only way that you learn to do better is to find out how to do better and to
Yes.
ask those questions. So if I am afraid to talk to you about the fact that you're blind, then I'm not going to be able to learn anything because I don't ask.
Yeah. And then the cycle continues of, you know, the not knowing and being afraid of what we don't know or don't
Yeah,
understand.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, so do you think that because I want to talk definitely again about mental illness and that stigma that we also need to change in
Yes.
our society. But do you think that the fact that you were born blind had anything to do with, growing up as a child and not getting what you needed, um, and affecting, um, how you felt about yourself, thus affecting anxiety or anything like that?
Yeah, I think so to a point, and that actually brings up a really good point because I was actually afraid for years to reach out for help because I figured anybody I
Mm.
reached out to would just be like, "Oh, you're blind, like of course you're depressed." But
Oh
no,
my
like
God.
there's
Oh,
so much more
wow.
going on than that. So was it a factor? Yeah, I think for sure. And my personality was also a factor because some people, for me, it was very much like I wanted everybody to always be comfortable around
Right.
me. So I would hold myself to this impossible standard
Mm.
of like perfection. Every time I left my house, I had to be 100% all the time. And
Wow.
then hopefully people would be comfortable, but it was just never enough. So I would always try to do more and more. Like I remember being really little and reading like storybooks and trying to
Mhm.
mimic the like visual body language
Mm.
of the other characters so hopefully people wouldn't even notice.
Wow.
So I think it was
Wow.
a lot of pressure that definitely did, create some of that anxiety. So whether that's, blindness or just my personality of
Hmm.
being a perfectionist, and maybe I would have found something else to be a perfectionist about if I
Right,
wasn't blind.
right,
I don't know, but yeah, I think
right.
there's so many factors, and then the environment you grow up in, there,
Sure.
the friends you have, the people where you go to school, it all just factors in. I think it's just a perfect storm of circumstances,
It
really.
is. And I think it's so interesting that you said you worked so hard to make other people feel comfortable. And so you wanted to do better, more, you were a perfectionist, so you could make people feel comfortable when it actually wasn't about you at all. It was about other people dealing with their own stuff if they
Yes.
were uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Wow. Um, I actually interviewed an amazing woman on my podcast who had two sons who were born blind,
Okay.
and she said, and it was so profound. She said, "What I realized much later was that their blindness wasn't holding them back in the least. It was her that was holding them back."
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I thought that was so profound because, she was trying so hard to either make it better or make, and they were like, hey, we're fine.
Yeah. Yeah. You can like that's it's tough. I mean, I'm not a parent, but I think it's tough
Yeah.
for any parent. But then when you have a child with a disability, there's this whole other like level because you want them to grow up quote unquote normal, but you also want to keep them safe. So it does kind of present a
Yeah.
little bit of a conundrum, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay. So I do want to, let's talk a little bit about the stigma of mental illness and what you think we need to do. Now, that's a loaded question. What do we need to do to remove that stigma? You made the comment that you hope things are better than when you were 7, and they said anxiety and just you'll grow out of it. I do think things are getting better, um, because we have certainly dealt with mental illness in my family, and I think we've had very responsive doctors and therapists, but I think we have a long way to
Yes.
go.
Yes.
A long way to go. What can we do to even each person individually help to um, really stop stigmatizing mental illness?
I think that we're having more conversations now than ever, which is great. But I wonder if we're having the right conversations because I
Mm,
see a lot on social media. People are really just skimming the surface. They'll be like, oh, I went through a terrible time, but I'm all better now. And when
mm.
somebody's actually going through that terrible time, they don't want to read that.
That's right.
So
That's right.
yeah, it's not particularly helpful or moving us forward. I think we have to be more comfortable talking about the messy stuff. Okay, what did
Yeah.
that actually look like? What did you come through and how were you able to get to the other side?
Yeah.
There's not much of a story and oh, I was in a bad place and I'm better now. Like,
Yeah.
okay.
Right, right. Well, and I think people need to understand it's that it is, you know, I just have so much going on in my head because I could relate to so much of what you're saying about mental illness. But I think one of the things that is so hard for some people to understand who don't have clinical depression or don't have, you can actually feel, or at least I should say I can feel myself starting to sink.
Yes.
So if I
Yeah.
start to go into that depressed state, I can actually feel it happening.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
that's when you were saying, okay, that's when you need to um, kind of act on that. So,
Yeah.
but that's not easy to do. Can you talk
No.
a little
No.
bit?
I wish.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think there's so many, self-help books and everything out there that promise to teach you how to do it perfectly. And there is no perfect. You're not
There's
going to get it
no,
right every single time. Sometimes you will spiral
yeah.
further than you would like to. And I think the key to that is really just giving yourself grace. Like
Yes.
it takes practice. Like anything takes practice. You wouldn't start playing the piano today and be like, "Oh, I can't play grade 8 classical pieces,
Yeah.
so I'm just gonna give
I'm
up."
quitting.
Yeah, exactly. Like,
Right. Right. I that is so true. And I think what's hard is sometimes when you start to feel yourself sinking into that, um, there is a moment where I I'll say it this way. It is tremendous hard work
yes,
to fight depression.
yes,
And that's what I think so many people don't understand.
yeah, yeah. I agree. Oh, you just get a little sad for a while, but then everything gets better. No, it's a lot of work, and it's more than just being sad. Like it's
Yeah.
almost hard to even put into words what it really feels like to help people understand.
Yeah. I heard somebody say the other day um, that they didn't understand um, why we might need to give medication to individuals who are feeling or who are experiencing mental illness, and they hear it equated a lot to, well, you wouldn't not give your child or, someone insulin if they have diabetes, or you wouldn't give someone, name any sort of um, illness, and you would give them medication. Why do you think so many people fight medication for mental illness? Have you noticed that or seen that?
Yes, yeah. I think it gets a really bad rap, which is unfortunate. I think there are doctors. Um, I knew somebody who went to the doctor because he was feeling a little bit tired. So rather than like running any blood tests or anything, the doctor's just like, well, do you want an antidepressant? Which is, in my mind, completely irresponsible.
That happened to me once. Yes. I was furious.
That's crazy. Like, oh my God.
Yeah.
That just blows my mind. So I think maybe that's where people are getting, this idea that they're being handed out left, right, and center. And, they are fairly serious drugs and they do have
Yeah.
fairly serious side effects that, you know, each person needs to evaluate on a personal basis and with their doctor. I'm in favor of it personally. It's
Mm-hmm.
helped me a lot. I think people think that you just like take this magic pill and everything feels better. It
Yeah. No.
no,
If
no, it's hard to
only.
describe, but yeah, no,
Right.
well, if that pill exists, like please sign me up
That's
because
right.
no side effects, no anything. I
Oh,
just feel awesome. No,
yeah.
you got to put in the work and
Yeah.
sometimes those pills are what allows you to break through just that tiny, tiny little bit to be able to put in the work, like anti anxiety medications. If you're like way over your threshold, there's nothing you can do about it. You're
Right.
not going to be
Right.
able to calm yourself down. If you can take something, it's not going to, for me, anyways, it doesn't calm me down perfectly. What it does is it allows me the chance to calm myself down. It just takes that little edge
Mm-hmm.
away so I can practice, my breathing, my different techniques because if I
Yes.
don't and I go too far then there's just no hope.
Yeah, absolutely. It literally gives you the ability to breathe through it and to
Yeah.
start working those tools.
Yeah, but it's
Yeah,
not magic. There's nothing magic about
it
it.
is not magic. No, I'm always looking for magical cures and miracles. So
Well, if you find one,
I will let you know.
keep me posted.
Absolutely. So, Heather, tell me about um, what you're doing today, your journey right now, and what you're working on, and how you've really gotten to the other side of that journey that you were on. New chapter.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's been like a crazy year when I think back, because we're coming up on the end of the year, and I think back and I'm like, I finished writing, editing, and I released my book a couple months ago, and then as soon as I
Amazing.
did that, I started writing for a new album, and that's coming out right away, probably in January.
So exciting.
And yeah, it is really exciting. So it's been kind of crazy and the album and the book actually kind of go hand in hand. They can
Mm,
stand on their own, of course, but people kind of have been joking that it's like my book's called Holding On by Letting Go and they're like, "Oh, the album's
mm.
like basically Holding On by Letting Go the musical or the
The
musical."
musical of the book.
Yeah. So it kind of like is this like book soundtrack, which is
That's fabulous.
interesting. But I was just, hopefully the message can reach more people by, widening, having different mediums to express the message.
Mm, that is beautiful. So, what would you say to people who are struggling with depression, who are struggling with anxiety, who are struggling with suicidal thoughts?
Yeah, I'm not gonna sit here and give you, empty platitudes like tomorrow's
Mhm.
another day, cheer up,
Yeah,
things get
right.
better, because I know when you're in the thick of it, people would say that to me, and that would be the exact moment that I would tune them out
Mm.
and stop
Yep,
listening to them.
yep.
But what I can tell you is that there will come a day when you'll stop in a moment and you'll feel so much joy in that moment,
Mm.
and you'll think to yourself, I would have missed this. And all I can hope is that you'll hang on for that day because it is worth it.
Wow, that's beautiful. So, one question I always ask all my guests is, what does resilience mean to you?
Resilience is, not perfection. It's trying, it's the journey. It's, this I don't think it's a destination. Like I always say, recovery is not a destination.
Yeah.
It's a choice that you make every day and a choice that you renew every day. And I think being
Yeah.
resilient to me is about making those choices and renewing those choices and putting one foot in front of the other and
Yeah.
understanding that, life's not going to be all up or down from here. There's ups and downs always. We all have
That's
them.
right.
And, some days just getting out of bed is, if that's all you can do, then that's all you can do, and then you move on to the next day and you
Yeah.
build, and to me that's resilience.
I love that. That is a great, and I think that that is such a great way to say it, because sometimes getting out of the bed, getting out of bed is something to be very proud of, and to say, you
Yes.
know what, I've accomplished that. I did that, and that was something that I needed to do. And so I love that definition. So um, I think, Heather, you have just shared so many amazing things, and your story is, it truly is a story of resilience. And just, you are so brave. I appreciate your courage in sharing your story and in speaking it in such an authentic and honest way. And I just want to thank you for that. Um, I do want to
Thank you so
share.
much.
Yes, absolutely. Oh my gosh, I'm just so excited that we got to talk, because I personally, I'm about to ask you where we can find all of your stuff, because I'm reading that book. I'm getting some of your albums. So I want to make sure that we have that available. But I do want to make sure that you do have the suicide hotline available to you. That is the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, is 800 273 8255. That is 800 273 8255. And if if you are if you need help in any way, please call that number, get help, go to a hospital, a local hospital. There are so many um, options and resources, but um, please don't let it go. Get help if you need it. Heather, I am personally extremely grateful that you are here on this earth. Um,
Thank you so
and
much.
absolutely, and this world is better with you in it. So I'm so glad that you are doing well. And I am just very honored that you were willing to talk to me today. This has just been amazing.
Yeah, it's been awesome. Thank you so much for, giving me an outlet to share my story.
Absolutely. So, how can people find you? How can they find your albums? How can they find your book? And then your next one that's going to be coming out, I guess, or your next album. So,
Yes.
tell us how they can find all things Heather.
They can visit my website at www.heather-hutchison.com, Hutchison. And on my website, there's links to my book where you can find it on Amazon, Audible, Apple Books, basically anywhere you shop for books. It's available in audiobook, print, and ebook. And my music is on there as well, the same website. There's links to Spotify, Apple Music, basically anywhere you listen to music. You can find my albums. And if you're interested, on my website, you can sign up for my email list and I will let you know all the information about the new album.
Oh, fantastic. That is great. And I will make sure to put all of those links and all that information in the notes of the podcast. So is it your voice reading the book? Are you the audio
Yes.
narrator? Oh, that's
Yes.
fantastic.
Yeah, it was like, I thought it was going to be way easier than it was. It
Oh
was a
yeah.
lot of work. It was
I
crazy.
can't. Okay, so as an author myself, I've thought about that and thought there's no way. That would just be so hard. Did you
It
do
is
all the
hard.
recording
Yeah.
yourself and everything?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. How long did that
Yeah,
take
and the
you?
book was like just coming out like in print too. I was kind of trying to line up all those releases, and it was just it was insane. It was
That would
way
be
too
very
much, but
stressful.
it was.
But also very
Yeah.
cool that it's your voice. I love that.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I'm really glad that I did it in the end. I think it was totally worthwhile, but oh, wow.
Okay, I may have to call you for advice. I'm just gonna
Absolutely.
say.
Yeah, totally. Do it. Yeah, because like even for me, I was like, oh, there's no way I can't make an audiobook, but I mean, it's out there, so
You did it. That's great.
yeah.
Well, Heather, thank you so much for being on the Being Resilient podcast. I mean, you are truly an inspiration,
Thank you. Thank you
truly.
so much for having me.
Absolutely. And we will see you next time on the Being Resilient podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. Have a great night.
Thank you for listening. Please share with anyone you think will benefit from this podcast.